In this class, we will learn how to render React components conditionally. First, we will get rid of the app2 components. Let's get back over here, and this is the one you created. So I'm going to get rid of this one, and also I'm going to get rid of this one from here. Let's save this. Let's get back to the app.js here. Next, we'll get rid of everything that we did so that we have a blank space to work with. So remove everything from header function to the constant recipe objects. That starts from here till here. Save that. We will also get rid of the image here. So I'm going to get rid of this one. Save that. We'll also remove the header, main, footer, which is inside the app components. I'm going to get rid of all these items here. Now inside this, we are going to simply create a div, and then we're going to give a class name, and I'm going to call this as app. And inside this, we will give a simple paragraph, call this as we will start working from here. Let's save that. Now about this app component here, let's create another component. We will call it a secret component. Function secret component. And inside this, we're going to return a h1 tag which says information for authorized users only. Let's save that. Now let's create a regular component and call it as regular component. Function regular component. And we're going to say return. And here we're going to give a h1 tag regular info which everyone can see. Okay, now we will use our app component to render the secret component and the regular component conditionally based on props. So let's get rid of everything we have inside the app component and add props in the parameter. Now go to the index.js file and add a property to the React DOM.render app here as authorized and I'm going to set this one to false. Save that. Now let's go back to the app.js here, and now we can write the logic to the conditional rendering. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to say if prop authorized, then it's going to return the secret component, else it's going to return the normal component. So let's get back to this one here, and we're going to type in if, and then we're going to say props dot authorized, then it's going to return the secret component, else it is going to return a regular component. I'll save this. I can get back to the browser here. You will see that regular info which everyone can see. Now we can go back to the index.js file and set the false to true. Let's save that. Now if you get to the browser here, and you can see information for authorized users only. So basically what's happening here is based on what the authorized value is, like it is true or false, the value of the app component is going to change. That is based on the component which is going to show conditionally. Now let's try and extend this a little bit more. We'll get back to the app.js here. We will add a fragment here inside the return and use JSS expression. So I'm going to get rid of all of these items here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say return. And inside that, we're going to add a fragment. And here we're going to say props dot authorized. If it is authorized, we're going to load the secret component. Else, we're going to add a regular component. Let's save that. Let's get back to the browser, and you can see we are getting this thing. That's the information for authorized users only. That's because the authorized is set to true. So if I set this to false, and if I get back to the browser, you can see regular infill, which everyone can see is loaded. In this class, we will learn about array destructuring. Now let's create a regular component about the React DOM.render. We're going to call this as checklist. And we're going to set this to const. Okay. And we're going to add some items inside this. For now, I'm going to add book, a pen, a calculator, and then a ruler. Now let's console log this. So I'm just going to say console.log, and then we're going to say checklist. Let's save that. Let's get to the browser, and if I go to console log, let's hit refresh. You can see that we have an array. We usually access array by index numbers. So let's try accessing 1. So let's get back to our code, and here I'm going to type in as 1. Let's save that. Let's get back to the browser. Let's hit refresh. And I can see this will output the second item. So let's see how we can destructure these items. What we will do is replace the const name checklist to important item. So let's get back to the code, and we're going to remove this checklist here and then add this square brackets. I'm going to call this as important item. Save that. What this will do is it will give me the first item in the array. So here, instead of giving this as checklist, all I have to do is important item. Let's save that. Let's get to the browser. Here you can see it is now rendering the first item, which is book. This one. We can extend this by adding more names. So for example, I can give a comma here. I can call this as second, and then I can call this as third. Let's save that. Now if I try to console log them, I'm going to call this as second, and then I'm going to call this as third. Let's save this. Now if you check your browser, you can see we have a book, a pen, and a calculator. You can also choose not to give a name to your variable. For example, let's say I want to access calculator. So all I have to do is just give a blank space for the first two. So I can just get rid of this one, and also I can get rid of this one, and the third one here is the calculator. So let's console log only the third item. Let's save this. Now if you go to your browser and hit refresh, you can see we have calculator in the output. Managing React use state hook is very important. And the most efficient way of handling a use state hook in React app is to use a function called useState. First, we'll go to the index.js file here and remove the array attributes from the app components. I'm going to get rid of all of these items here. Save that. And we're going to remove this fragments too. And I get rid of these items too here. Save this. We'll also remove the other components from the app.js file. And we're going to remove everything before the app function to the one which we have here. Save this. We will get rid of this one. And we're going to call a h1 tag here. And this will simply call this as hello world. Save this. Now we will import the use state in the first line of the app.js. So just click here and I say import React, and then here we're going to add the use state. Save that. Then we will use the use state below the function app. So let's try using the use state. I'm going to get rid of this props here. So here we can simply type in const something, and we're going to set this to use state. Let's save that. Then we will console log the something variable. Save that. Let's get to the browser and let's hit refresh. Now if you open this up, you can see that we don't have anything. The first one is set to undefined, and the second one here is a function. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to define something in the first item and then use the second item or function here to update the first item. So let's try this now. Let's get back to our code. We will set the initial state of the variable something to in a good mood. So in the use state, we're going to add in a good mood. Let's save that. Now when we go to console log and let's hit refresh, you can see that the first item here is I'm in a good mood. So the output we are getting here is an array output. In the previous class, we learned about array destructuring. Let's use that here. We will change the const something use state in a good mood to const first. I'm going to change this something to first. And we're going to console log the first here. Save that. Now if you go to the browser and hit refresh, you can see that all we get is a message called in a good mood. So now what we have to do is we have to display this message inside the app. So let's get back to our code here. And instead of writing just hello world, I'm going to get rid of this one. And here I'm going to type in today I am, then we can output the first. Save this. So now if you go to your browser and hit refresh, it says today I'm in a good mood. So this is basically taking the use state in a good mood and rendering the first. Now let's return another value. We already know the use state returns a pair. The first value is a state value. The second is a function that will use to update the state. So let's modify some stuff in our variable. We are going to add another variable beside the first variable. We'll call it as change first. Just give it a comma and say change first. Let's save that. Now in the return, let's add a button. For that button, we will add a on-click handle. So just click here and say button, and I'm going to call this as change mood. And here we're going to add a handler. I'm going to call this as onClick. Now in the onClick function, we will add a function to change the mood. So basically we need to specify a function here, and then we're going to say change first to in a happy mood. Let's save that. Now let's get back to the browser and hit refresh. Here, if you click on the change mood, this will change the good mood to the happy mood. Now we can add as many moods as we want. For example, let's add 2 more moods, sad and frustrated. So I'm going to get back to the code, and I'm just going to duplicate this line here. And in a happy mood, I'm going to change this to sad. Save that. And then I'll duplicate this again. I'm going to call this as frustrated. Save this. I'm going to change the change mood to happy, change mood to sad, and then I'm going to change mood to frustrated. Let's save this. Let's get to the browser. Let's hit refresh. Now you can see we have 3 buttons: change mode to happy, change mode to sad, and then change mode to frustrated. Let's hit refresh. The first one is going to change mode to happy. The second one is going to change mode to sad. The third one is going to change mode to frustrated. And also in the console log, you can see what's happening. Use effect is another part of the React library. Let's see a basic usage of how to use the use effect. Later in the course, we will use the same to fetch some data. First thing is you will need to import use effect from the React library. So just here, just give a comma. I'm going to call this as use effect. Let's save that. So now that we have imported, let's see the current status of the use state in our console. Let's try to output the current use state with the help of the use effect right below the variable which we created. So I'm going to call this here. I'm going to say use effect, and then inside that we will call a function, and we're going to say console.log, and inside that we're going to type in we are first today, and we'll get rid of this one. Let's save that. Now let's go to the browser and hit refresh. Now in the console, basically what happens is if I click on the change modes, let's refresh the browser. So now if I click on the change modes, it changes with it. This is what use effect actually does. It doesn't have to do anything with the data that is changing in the browser, but in the console itself. So if I click on change modes, you can see that it is giving us the same data which we used to get. So now let's try adding a second fragment after the console.log with an empty array. Let's get back to the code, and here we're going to add an empty array. Let's save that. Now inside that empty array, you can add the first variable and nothing much changes. So I'm just going to add first. Let's get back here, let's hit refresh. If I click on this one, as you can see, nothing much changes. But we'll create a second variable. So I'm going to get back to the code. And here we're going to create another variable. I'm going to call this as const. And we say secondary. Then we're going to say change secondary. And then we're going to set this to use state. I'll set this one to nice. Save that. Now let's try add another use effect hook. But before that, let's remove the array from the first use effect. So I'm going to get rid of this one here. And here we're going to use effect, and then create a function. We'll say console.log, and inside that we're going to say it's $secondary here. Let's save that. Now let's try to render all of the variables. Now in the return over here, after these three buttons, I'm going to add another one. I'm going to call this as button. I'm going to set this change day to awesome. Okay, and I'm going to add a event to this. So I'm going to say on click, we're going to add a function here, which is basically going to change secondary to awesome. Let's duplicate that, and this one I'm going to change to great, and let's change this one to great. Let's save this. Now let's go to the browser and hit refresh, and if I click on the change mode to awesome, you can see it's awesome here. So if I click to change day to great, it says that it's great here, but also we get the first one which we kind of added there. Now let's add our array back and let's see what happens. I'm going to get back to the code, and in the first one here I'm going to set this to first, and then I'm going to add another one here. I'm going to set this to secondary. Save this. Okay, so let's save this. Let's get back to the browser and hit refresh. Now if I click on the items, we're going to get only the items which are going to be affected. For example, if I click on change day to awesome, we get only change day to awesome. And I say great, we only get great. We don't get the one like this one was coming again and again, so we don't get that now. We only get the one which we click on. So if I click on this one, we get only this, we don't get the great day again. So if I do this, and so on and so forth, it goes on. In this class, let's see how we can manage a checkbox and its state using React. First, let's get rid of all the other stuff and keep a clean slate. So I'm going to get rid of all of these items here. And I'm going to get rid of all of these things too. Let's save that. Now inside the fragment, let's create a simple checkbox. I'm going to call this as input. Type is checkbox. Save that. Okay, so now what we want to do is to handle the state of the checkbox. Now let's create a use state to change our checkbox. So here I'm going to say const, and inside that we're going to say checked, and we'll create another one, call this as set checked, and then we're going to assign that to use state, and by default I'm going to set this to false. Let's save that. Now by default we can assign the value to be checked. So in the checkbox here we can set the value to be checked. Let's save that. Now we need to add a onChange event. So what we can do here is we can give a onChange event. I'm going to call this as onChange, and inside that we're going to call a function, and then we're going to say set checked, and inside that we're going to say checked to not checked. Save that. Now below this, let's add a JSX expression to output the value. So after the input tag here, I'm going to create a paragraph tag, and here basically what we're going to do is we're going to say checked. If it is checked, it's going to say, okay, so my bad. So if it is checked, it is going to say checked. Else it is going to say not checked. Okay, let's save that. So if I get to the browser and hit refresh, and if I click on this one, you can see as it is checked, it's going to show checked. If I click this again, if I uncheck it, it's going to say unchecked. Let's get back to our code. There is an easier way of doing this. We can create a function which will handle the toggle. So I'm going to call this function here, and I'm going to call this as toggle. And basically, I'm just going to take all of these things here, cut this, and paste it inside this. Save that. Now in the onChange, I can get rid of all of these things here, and I can simply call toggle. From now on, we can call this method or function as a reducer. Now let's see how we can use the use reducer from React. Let's import the use reducer here. Let's save that. And now we are going to change the use state to use reducer. So I'm going to click on this one. I'll call this as use reducer. And I can get rid of this one. Now we can change the set checked to toggle. That's the new function. So instead of set checked, we're going to say toggle. Now we can update the use reducer. So instead of false, we can call this as, we can say checked, and then we're going to say not checked. And then we're going to set this to false. And now you can get rid of the function toggle here. And this should still work in the browser. Let's get back here. Let's hit refresh. As you can see, if I click on the checked, it's going to say checked. If I uncheck it, it's going to say not checked.